Boom. Okay, we are alive, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a while since we've made a little bit of a video update. Been trying to figure out what's going on, and I don't actually think that's going to happen in today's day and age. There's been some interesting developments. You know, in our last video, we were talking about the central bank digital currencies and how many of these countries that are trying to implement these digital currencies are already in talks with the World Health Organization for some type of global health digital something certification network, GHDCN, whatever they call it. But either way, whether it's money or identity, if someone owns that portion of you, you effectively become a type of slave. You know, one of the most valuable aspects of why Bitcoin kind of sold us in the first place is that, hey, a non-government backed money backed by the freedom of choice of the people who are using it, just in itself, through voluntary concession, is actually extraordinarily valuable. Now, one of the downsides here is that there are many times in life when what you get pushed into is not a voluntary choice. For instance, your birth certificate, your passport, your driver's license, all of your forms of identity act as a type of straw man version of you. If you've ever wondered why your name is in all capital letters on these documents, it's actually for a good reason. It's because it's not lawfully you as the person. You as the person as individually is written about with just one single capital letter in front of your name. Now, this may not seem like a huge distinction, but one of the unique aspects about what's going on here is most countries use those new citizens as the future debt payers of the debt that they're taking out today. So, say as a country want to take out a bunch of money, we're like, well, yeah, look at all, we have all these productive citizens who are in the younger demographics who are going to be growing up and willing to pay back this absurd debt for school or health care or roads, whatever it might be. The downside is we have been slowly two-stepping our way into tyranny, and nobody seems to notice or care. Throughout the pandemic in 2020, everyone just threw all their rights away to the air and said, oh, just save us, good government, you are in charge. And I've never really seen, you know, people who are good friends of mine, I consider outside-of-the-box thinkers, just all of a sudden were like pro-pharma. And this doesn't make any sense. And again, the nature of this seems to be when fear kicks in, people make decisions that go against their own best interests. Now, if you're a part of our private group, I've long talked about Bitcoin's value at its highest when your money is least safe from the governments that are currently controlling the territory that you live in. Now, down here in Costa Rica, where I live, there are actually a lot of freedoms in the laws. For instance, if you do not do business in Costa Rica, no taxes. Now everyone's all praising, oh, El Salvador, no taxes. Well, Costa Rica already has that. You can buy land, business, cars, you can spend crypto here. It's just not considered legal tender. Now, this is what's really abstract, and one of the things that have always confused me is that the Bitcoin maximalist argument is that, well, Bitcoin can be the only choice. So if you go to El Salvador, you're actually forced to take and accept Bitcoin because the government says so. This is fiat. That's what fiat means. Fiat means by government decree. So if all of a sudden your government says, hey, you have to use Bitcoin, even though it's better money, you're still hitting the difficult problem of forcing people to do things. And the monopoly that government has over violence is hard to beat. I believe there is a quote of Joe Biden being, well, over your AR-15s, you'll need an F-16 fighter jet. And this is true. You cannot arm yourself against the government who has a monopoly over the violence and the ways that they control and manipulate the people. Now, you might want to get into an argument about whether or not that you think that's a good thing, because a lot of people seem to think the security and the safety of their government is a good thing. But for me, the point of decentralization is to remove the power from any centralized governing force. That's just pretty clear and simple. If the centralized governing force is telling you then you have to accept Bitcoin, you've actually gone against the definition of decentralization. It's now government fiat money. Even though it can't be printed, it's actually enforced by decree. And this is, again, the dangerous like two-step to tyranny that I don't think a lot of people are noticing, because effectively what will happen is if these global digital health certification networks come up, your sovereign passport, which for a generation has allowed you to travel freely, if you have a good passport. I feel sorry for all my Ugandan, Rwandan, and Nigerian friends who tell me the horrors of trying to get between country to country due to the lack of visas and transits that they need to get between everywhere. It's just a horrible hassle. So the difficult part is we have a money that's not government backed. It's choice, voluntary choice. And if you want to pay us in Dogecoin, pay us in Dogecoin. If you want to accept Dogecoin and that's what you want to be paid in, well, we can just as easily change Bitcoin into Dogecoin. Now, again, we could make a bunch of technical arguments. I don't think Dogecoin is as solid as Bitcoin. Again, if you've read our newsletter, you'll know that Bitcoin is like the North Star of the rest of our celestial crypto ecosystem. And because of that, what was most important to me is the decentralization of that valuable data, right? So if all of a sudden the global digital health certification network owned by the United Kingdom and the World Health Organization are those who own and control all your data, this is the worst type of tyranny. Now it rears its ugly head most often in money, because money is printed by the central banks, another centralized form of tyranny, and they give that money to whoever they want. For instance, if they want to give a bunch of money to Ukraine to fight Russia, this kind of invisible non-enemy to the West, what you end up getting is money that could be used for productive things onshore, like in the United States, better schooling, better education, a whole suite of ideas that money could go to that would better facilitate growth in the United States. It just goes to spend money on bombs. And the money on bombs, well, luckily doesn't hit the street inflation, because you yourself are not buying Javelin missiles and rocket launchers. So the price of the average everyday person's stuff doesn't go up. Not to mention war kills people. People are dying. There's less money for them to spend. If there's less money for them to spend as the average individual, is more likely that BlackRock or Vanguard could roll into Ukraine and just buy everything and own that country as a little, I guess you'd call it, finance hub for money laundering the world's dirtiest criminals, because that's what it appears to be. Ukraine is just the dirtiest of criminals. I mean, they're right up there. Like, if I wouldn't pick either of them technically to live in, if you're like, you want to live in a Russia or Ukraine, like neither of those. Those are both probably pretty bad decisions. But the point here is that this centralization of identity, health, money, governance, science, whatever it is, every time you see a pigeonhole of people trying to own and centralize the data, you are hopefully damn near the end of that situation. Because what we have right now is unsustainable. So ultimately, long term, if you go back to my second video that I ever made on this channel, it's been surprising how long I've been doing this. My estimate was Bitcoin upwards of $6 million. It was at 200 when I made that video. So we're way closer than we were back then. Back then, saying Bitcoin is going to 6 million when it was at $200, I just sounded like a total lunatic. And with my long, crazy hair on the jungle beach then, I probably looked even more lunatic than I sounded. But as we venture forward, the hope here is that people really start to understand that the decentralization of almost all forms of centralized power is what will really make the world a more feasible place for us to all let's say, exist in. Again, the reason being is we've seen this with data and science over the last 2-3 years, more so than I'd ever thought before. We went over this in one of our previous conversations, the John Ioannidis paper, why most medical research findings are false. Is because we have a centralized form of peer review. That peer review is being largely bought out by pharmaceutical interests. And when you can corrupt a centralized source that gives out health data, money data, governance, all these sorts of things, you end up with basically the worst of whatever could happen in society. So just a little quick update to make sure, if you are in a country that is trying to adopt these things, if you're good with your legal team, reach out, make complaints to your members of parliament, to your local Congress, whoever it might be, because right now the transition between totally centralized money, governance, science, this is the route that will take humanity to unimaginable tyranny. The thing that walks us out of that is a much more open, decentralized version of everything. Actually, more and more I've been wondering to myself, how much of the scientific conversation has held our species back, because if the truth is not profitable, the truth that's what doesn't make any money gets hidden, and there you're presented with a new truth, some patentable, fund-generating truth that's not as simple as some of these other 100 ideas that could have easily solved the problem. So we're like a fork in the road. And I think more and more importantly than whether we go left or right is just people are aware that that is taking place. Because the average individual that I've talked to, although the mounting concern over the excess deaths we've talking about for over a year now. By the way, excess deaths have been running hot for a year. That means now, right now, more people are dying on average than ever died during the pandemic. And you have to stop and think, how do we get here? And how do we fix this? Otherwise, at one point, the best decision is just to throw away your passport, throw away your identity, and go sit on a beach and drink coconuts until there are no more sunrises to enjoy. Anyway, just a quick little update. Oh, by the way, we are doing another flow culture retreat. So if you want to go to flowculture.xyz, drop in. If you guys want to come, we've got a few spots left. Decided to open it up for the Bear family. We've got some great facilitators. We've got Maze, Dakota Yoga, doing some fantastic yoga. Shannon, Michaela helping with some more movement exercises. Daniel will be doing ice bath and breath work. And I'll be leading 2 to 4 hour meditations every day in our little yoga shala. So if you want, make sure you check that out. If you've got any thoughts or questions, you can leave those in the comments down below. A quick little video update. Hopefully I'll be able to pound out a few of these. I'm headed back to Canada for a family member's funeral. Sadly, that's how life goes. It just keeps moving on. So if your grandparents are still alive, tell them that you appreciate them and love them. If you're anyone that you have in your life that you love and appreciate, you should call them and tell them that. Anyways, see you in the next one.